Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Alexis Medrano. I am currently a user experience intern here at Catapult. I work alongside the UX team, the product team, as well as some sports scientists to journey map the workflow of OpenField. I've had this great opportunity through an organization called Women in Sports Tech, also known as WIST, whose main mission is to change the ratio of women in the sports tech industry. Today I have the honor of introducing Hannah Jowett, who is currently a disability and pathway analyst at England and Wales Cricket Board. Today she's going to be sharing with us how tech has played a key role in the development of her athletes and how it has supported her own career growth. Before I pass it on over to Hannah, I would just like to remind everyone that throughout the webinar, please feel free to drop any questions in the Q&A chat box, and then we will spend the last 15 minutes going over those questions with Hannah. And without further ado, Hannah.
Thank you. Hi everyone. Thank you for joining today, and thank you for Catapult for giving me this opportunity as well. So as Alexis mentioned, today I just wanted to go through a bit about my career and my journey so far, particularly being a female working in male-dominated sport as well. And then also about how I use technology in kind of the ever-evolving area that is performance analysis. So I currently work for England Cricket as a performance analyst. So I work on the men's pathway side and also with the disability squads that we have as well. So I've been at the ECB for about 6 years now. And in that time, I've covered quite a few roles. So I'll go into that in a little bit more detail. So this is my journey so far. So if I go back all the way to my university days, I actually didn't really know what I wanted to study. I was quite good at science and I was quite good at maths, and I loved sport, but I wasn't really any good at it. So I kind of stumbled across the idea of sports science, and I thought, yeah, that sounds like a pretty good mix actually. So I went to Sheffield Hallam University, and I studied for 3 years there at my undergrad. I studied sport and exercise science. So while at uni, I tried to take every opportunity that I could really. So that started with some of the opportunities that I got for hands-on experience within labs, whether it was a biomechanics lab and learning how to use the latest technology for motion analysis or force analysis, gait analysis, or whether it was in physiology or the nutrition labs, just using everything to my kind of full potential that I could there. I also took every opportunity that I could, kind of getting extra coaching qualifications. I took a gym instructor's qualification course as well. So just really trying to maximize the potential that I could out of that experience. And then in my third year, I got the opportunity to actually put some of this to actual experience within the elite world. So I got an internship working as a strength and conditioning coach at Barnsley Football Club with their academy. So a couple of nights a week, I would head down to Barnsley and I'd be coaching their under 13 squad. I'd be doing kind of gym and strength and conditioning sessions with them and their warm-up drills and all of that kind of thing. And for me, this was my first chance to actually have a bit of first-hand experience of the elite sport world. And it just confirmed to me that it really was the area that I wanted to work in, which was quite reassuring, really. So I decided to stay on at Hallam and do a master's. So I stayed on for another year. And in that year, I was really fortunate that Sheffield Hallam went into partnership with the ECB and created a few consultancy posts as performance analysts. So I applied for the role and was fortunate enough to be one of the successful applicants. So this meant that I was we were given kind of matches, international matches, matches from franchise games, etc., that we would code for the ECB and then kind of feed back into them. So just analysing the data for them and feeding that back into their team of analysts that they had based in Loughborough. So this was like really starting to give me some real first-hand experience in performance analysis. So doing my master's, I'd actually chosen to specialise in biomechanics and performance analysis. They were the areas that had really interested me at undergrad. And this was just giving me that hands-on experience to really put this to the test. So following on from there, I finished my master's and I needed a job. So there was a strength and conditioning and sports science internship at Notts County Football Club back home for me. I'm originally from Notts, so it was the perfect job really. So off I went back home and applied for the job and was fortunate to get the position. And for me, this was like the dream. I was working in full-time elite sport as a sports scientist, and I was being able to put into practice all of those skills that I'd learned. I was really fortunate at Notts County as well. So although I kind of took on the strength and conditioning internship, they let me take on all of the sports science stuff and start to really explore that potential as well. So this is where I first started to use technology for kind of workload monitoring of players. So when I initially started, we were using the polar heart rate belts. And then towards the end of my year there, we got in connections with Catapult and we started using their GPS units as well. So this was kind of my first dip in the water of that kind of technology aiding kind of workload monitoring and the sports science side of things in that capacity, away from biomechanics and performance analysis, really. So as I got to the end of my kind of season at Notts County, I was getting a little bit concerned, I'll be honest. There wasn't really any other jobs out there. I was struggling to find any other opportunities, and I needed a job that paid full time, and I was really struggling. And I actually debated moving out of sports science for a period of time. In all honesty, the thing that stopped me is I didn't really know what else I wanted to do. So I didn't really have an alternative. So I just had to keep plowing forward with what I really wanted to do. And an opportunity came up at the UCB. They advertised for a split role between sports science and performance analysis. So on paper, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, this is the dream job right here. It's kind of pulling together all of that analysis expertise that I've got, along with all of my experience in sports science, and it's putting it all together in the sport that I absolutely love as well. I've kind of followed cricket my whole life. We were a very cricketing family. I tried to play it, not very well, but I did try. So I put in an application, and to be honest, I didn't think I'd be successful, but I was, thankfully, and 6 years later, I'm still here. So yeah, that's the start of that story, really. So in my role at England Cricket, as I mentioned, I kind of started as a sports scientist and performance analyst, split role. But my job's actually really quite evolved in the time that I've been here, and it's moved from different squads to different areas. But for me, actually, that's really what makes the role what it is. It allows me to push myself. It allows me to develop all those different skill sets that I need. I've moved from workload monitoring back into my biomechanics and technical analysis. I've dipped my toe into data science and machine learning. I'm still obviously kind of involved in the performance analysis, the tactical aspects of the game. It's really let me develop my skill set as far as I want it to. And alongside that, maybe slightly crazily, I've decided to take on a part-time PhD at Loughborough University as well. So I'm going back to my biomechanics roots, kind of where it all started back at university. And I'm exploring female pace bowlers and their biomechanical actions. And so there's been a lot of work done in the men's game on this, but I wanted to explore the women's side of it. So, as I kind of mentioned, my role has covered a lot of areas over the years. So that's included performance analysis. So I've worked on the England men's pathway for the last 4 or 5 years. So that's predominantly working with the under-19 squad, the England Young Lions. We tour with them kind of every winter, and we compete in an under-19s World Cup every couple of years, which is a great opportunity to see the young players developing and kind of coming through as the next England stars of potential of England. And then in the last year, I've also taken on being the performance analyst of the England disability squads. So we have 4 squads. We've got the visually impaired, the physical disability, learning disability, and the deaf squad as well. So haven't done too much work with them yet due to the kind of the environment of COVID that we've been living in, but they're definitely squads that I'm going to be moving forwards with, and I'm really looking forward to that opportunity as well, actually. So being a performance analyst day to day, Yes, it includes kind of coding matches when you're live at a match. It includes the pre-match preparation, whether that's opposition analysis or ensuring that we are prepared fully as a squad as well. It also includes kind of the post-match analysis, so reviewing our own performance, reviewing the opposition, but also kind of the stuff away from the kind of match day-by-day stuff. It also includes stuff at a bit of a more strategy, higher level of, well, what does it take to win, and kind of what are our key performance indicators that we need to be meeting. And once we've established that, how does that impact upon the squad selection, also upon how the squad plays, so the kind of the strategy that we want the squad to play with. All of those kind of things is obviously led by coaches a lot of the time, but all of that performance analysis is kind of feeding into that and pretty data driven in that capacity as well. So another area that I've worked in is the sports science area. So I'm really going to gloss over this one because I'm going to talk about it a little bit more in detail, kind of following on, but it kind of includes the workload monitoring and heavily the use of GPS and accelerometers as well, which I'll cover in a bit more detail on the next slide. And then in more recent years, the role has also kind of started to encompass talent ID as well. So that can include the selection of squads, it can include the selection of specific players, looking at players' individual development, but also looking at the research side of it. So a lot of research I've done in the last year has actually been looking at how do we identify talent at an earlier age, and what are we looking for, and what are the key performance indicators indicating that an individual could come on and be the next big star for England. So kind of just finding different ways to answer those questions and help provide more information and more richness to the discussions that happen around players and most importantly, the players' development. So now for a bit more about actually how I use technology in performance analysis. So as an analyst, I use technology literally every single day of my life, whether it's video, whether it's some software on the computer, whether it's somehow managing to data mine and data crunch a load of data that we have. We literally use it on a daily basis. So the first thing I wanted to speak about was like data in cricket. So data is actually something that we have a lot of in cricket. Cricket is kind of traditionally quite a data-driven sport. You know, you just have to go down to your local club in an evening and players do focus on their stats and how they performed and look at the scorecard and how did the opposition do. It is naturally quite a data-driven sport. As an analyst in cricket, we code every single ball of a game. So that effectively means that each ball that happens in a game gets broken down into like an individual separate event within that game. So for each separate event, each separate ball that is delivered in the game, we record so much data that happens for that specific ball. So for a typical analyst, you'd be coding the line that the ball has pitched, the length that the ball has pitched, where the ball would have passed the batsman, what type of delivery it was bowled, what type of shot was played by the batsman, the number of runs that were scored, the fielding position, who fielded it, where it was hit in the field, just to name a few of the things that we'd be recording literally ball by ball for every single ball that is happening. So you can start to see how our rich data source starts to develop there. And even when we don't have ball by ball data as well, when we're just going off scorecard data, that in itself, as I mentioned, kind of with the club cricket analogy, it really does provide us with quite a bit of data itself. From the scorecard yourself, you can see how the batsman was out. You can see how many runs they scored, how many balls they faced, how many boundaries they hit. You can see the bowler's stats. You can see how many overs they bowled, how many runs they went for, wickets, maidens. You can then start to look at a more team trajectory as well. You can start to look, did the team peak at a certain point in the game? Did they actually drop off and have a bit of a batting collapse? You know, what was the story of the innings? What was the story of the match? And you can tell all of that just by looking at a scorecard. So there really is so much rich data that we can use. Kind of put it into a little bit of context here. I've got the example of the Indian Premier League here, so the franchise T20s that are played in India. So in a tournament year, yeah, it's played over kind of a 6-8 week window, but 64 matches are played in a year this year. In each of those matches, 240 balls could be bowled. So there's 240 individual events that are occurring. That equates to over 15,000 balls per tournament year. So in that kind of 8-week window, that's 15,000 plus balls that have been bowled, which over the tournament's history, which I think it started back in 2008, we're looking at over 190,000 individual ball events purely on IPL data. That's not taking into consideration any of the international T20s that we play or anything else. So that in itself kind of just puts a bit of context on quite how much data that we have. So in regards to that as well, I've kind of alluded that we have the T20 format. So in cricket, we have 3 formats of the game. We've got multi-day, which is kind of test match cricket at international level, played over 5 days. We have 50 over cricket, so 1-day international cricket, and we have 2020 cricket. And as of later this month, we'll actually have 4 formats with the introduction of the 100 to the game as well. So as an analyst, each of those different formats has its own specific demands, whether it's tactical demands, whether it's technical demands, physical demands. They all vary across the different formats that are being played. So it's up to us as the analysts to start to then explore that data set and start to get a feel for how do those demands vary between those formats. So if I then kind of move away from the data, which we've kind of just spoken about how we collect it all together, I then wanted to talk a bit more about, okay, so what technology do we have that then feeds into that data as well? So we've kind of got the bare bone structure of the data. What are we using to enrich that and make it even richer data? So the first thing that I wanted to talk about really was Catapult. So we've used Catapult since 2015 at the ECB. We started a collaboration with the company. And the first question that we wanted to answer really was, we wanted to look at the physical demands of the game. So there's a bit of research out there that's previously been done in this area, but there hadn't been anything done particularly recently. And the game has changed a lot in recent years in kind of the modern era of it. So it's something we wanted to explore. We wanted to understand how do the different formats of the game, so multi-day versus 1-day versus T20, how do those different formats impact on the physical demands of the game? Also, how do the positions that you play, so whether you're a pace bowler or a spin bowler, a batsman or a wicket keeper, like does that actually impact on the demands that are placed upon you physically within the game? So we set about exploring this, and there were some really quite eye-opening things actually, particularly with the multi-day format. And if you're spending 90 overs and a full day in the field, kind of 6-7 hours fielding, some of the distances and speeds that were covered and hit were really quite high, and a bit of a shock actually to some of us, of quite the extremes that you might need to prepare for as a bowler. And although that's not every single day, day in, day out, actually you may have to perform at that level at some point. So you do need to be physically prepared for it. And in the last couple of years, Alex Bliss at St. Mary's University has led some really good work actually exploring this further for us. So I've got here on the screen the title of his research paper that's just been published, which looks at the variability and the physical demands of our international pace bowlers, seam bowlers, and it compares the demands in the 1-day game, so the 50 over format, against the T20 game in international matches over the last 5 years that we had data for. And there was some really interesting actually information coming from this. Actually, yeah, they're both white ball games, they're both played at a high intensity, but the workload demands of the 1-day game were not the same as the T20 game, and so they do need to be treated as two different formats when you're preparing physically for them. So yeah, that's kind of the initial research that's come out of this, but Alex is doing some great work kind of developing some other areas from that as well at the minute. Then staying with Catapult, the second area that we wanted to discuss once we signed up with Catapult was Okay, so we know generally speaking what's happening on the pitch during the game, but what about those individual events? We've already spoken about how each ball is effectively a different event in cricket. So what about each of those individual events? Can we break it down as to what's happening during that time? So fast bowlers notoriously are the most frequently injured in cricket, and it's typically stress fractures of the back. A lot of research has been done in. And a lot of the research has suggested workloads are related to this as well, and the intensity of deliveries, along with various other factors as well. So we wanted to explore how can we make workload monitoring easier in regards to counting how many balls they've bowled. So with Catapult, we set about developing an algorithm that automatically detected bowling deliveries. So that would automatically tell us at that time point, a bowling delivery was bowled by the individual. Not only would this help us with our initial aim of telling us exactly how many balls an individual had bowled, so we know how long I had to try and guess during a training session and try and work out how many had been bowled in a certain amount of time, because it's amazing how hard it is to count those deliveries. So it kind of dealt with that first problem. It also helped us to then split that data up. So that 3-hour long session that we've got in the field, we've now managed to split it into kind of 12-second windows of exactly when bowling deliveries occurred. And we've managed to get rid of all of that dead data in between that we're not really interested in as well. And thirdly, from that, we then started to be able to explore a little bit more about the bowling deliveries. So we've been able to start to think about what intensity is it bowled at. We've started to look at the run-up speed and the speed at which the bowler's running at when they approach the crease, and does that drop off from their speed that they initially set off at. We can start to look at the rotation of their torso as well. So all of these measures, we can start to begin to kind of unpeel from the onion, so to speak, and kind of just get a little bit more data about that bowling delivery that was bowled. So this was our aim, and with the help of Jerome at Catapult, we managed to achieve this with a machine learning algorithm that had a far higher sensitivity and specificity than the previous algorithm had. But most importantly for us, it worked in a training and a match environment. So previously, the algorithm that had previously existed didn't work particularly well in a training environment when bowlers were bowling at lower intensities. But this new algorithm did, which not only helped us when we had bowlers kind of bowling at that lower intensity, but it also helped us kind of get it out there to everyone. It didn't matter whether they were the elite men's team, whether they were the under-19s team, whether they were the women's team. It worked for everyone, this algorithm, which was really what was the important factor for us. So this is something that I've used in particular, working a lot with coaches. So once we'd kind of got this algorithm working, we were able to profile bowlers. So we were able to say, this specific bowler, this is their optimum run-up speed, this is their optimum drop-off speed when they approach the crease, this is their optimum rotation value, this is their optimum intensity value. All of these numbers that we could start to kind of profile what each individual bowler looked like. And that's being able to help us kind of in rehabbing players when they're coming back to match fitness. We can put a unit on them and we can say, yeah, actually they are back at match fitness, they're deemed to be back up at that level. But it's also helped us with performance as well. So we actually know when a player is performing at their peak and at their optimum, and what are their values at that level, and maybe on a bad day, well, what's changed here slightly, what's gone slightly different. Just aiding those conversations with the coaches and the players. And sometimes as a player or as a coach, you think something's off, but you're not 100% sure what it is. But actually using the GPS and accelerometer data, it's helped us to actually maybe pinpoint some of those things and go, oh, actually, yeah, you weren't attacking the crease as hard, you weren't running in as hard, or you were attacking it too hard actually and just lost your tempo a little bit, or whatever the issue is. So this is something that I've used a lot, in particular with the under-19s team that I work with alongside the coaches, and actually helping the under-19s kind of start to identify the bowler that they are, and when they're bowling at the best, what are they doing, and what does their run-up speed look like at that point, and all those other metrics as well, and just utilizing that with the coaches for the players to start to really get their heads around what that looks like for them as an individual. So if we move away from Catapult for a bit now, kind of, as I mentioned, we've got such rich data sources within cricket, from scorecard data to ball by ball data to GPS data to accelerometer data to all the other bits of technology and insight that are fed into us. And as I've mentioned a few times now, that we've started to explore the use of machine learning models. And I think this is an ever-growing area of sports performance analysis. It definitely has evolved massively in the last few years. It's all about taking those large data sets that we've got and collating all of those multiple sources together as well in the most effective way, and analysing that data set with these machine learning models to answer those questions that we might have. So the bowling algorithm that I just mentioned, that was a machine learning model that was built and trained by Jerome at Catapult. So that's one use that we've had a bit in the last few years. A lot of the talent ID work that I have done in the last few years, so in the last year in particular, has used machine learning algorithms. So some work that I have done is looking at identifying potential performance indicators and how that helps with earlier identification of players and the progression of that talent as well. We've also done some machine learning models on some pretty large longitudinal data, actually, that kind of goes back over 10, 11, 12 years of data set that we have, kind of younger youth players. And that builds on the work that was originally done by Ed Barney and his PhD, and Ben Jones more recently in his PhD with Bangor University. So Ben was exploring the predictors of potential performance. And then in the last year, I've kind of been able to grow up on that as well, as the data has matured, and we've used machine learning models to train that and really identify what are those key predictors of talent in that young age group. So all of this is helping us use this as a tool, and we use these as a tool alongside the coaches, alongside the other practitioners, and the other experts within this area, just to help identify our highest potential talent, and to help them, most importantly, along the way with their development as well. Like, if we can highlight key areas in which they're performing amazingly well in, or equally maybe not so well in, can we help them develop those areas so actually they're even higher potential in those areas as well. There's so many more uses for machine learning as well, but I won't go on and on about them. But yeah, they're a massive area of sport performance analysis at the minute, and kind of getting into the nitty-gritty and modelling of questions. So another area that I wanted to talk about as well, see if I can get my video to work. There we go. Is Vicon. So this is more back to my roots, back to my biomechanical analysis. So Vicon is a 3D motion analysis capture system, which I'm using within my PhD. So our system that we have based in Loughborough is built upon 18 infrared cameras, and we get a participant into the lab and we cover them in 48, 52 markers, something around that number. And each marker kind of sticks on their joints and is then detected by the infrared cameras when they bowl, and we are able to analyze their technique and build skeletons like the one on here, kind of showing what their skeleton is doing during their bowling technique. So this is something that a lot of work has been done in over the last kind of 10, 15 years. Started with a PhD from Pete Worthington, another one by Paul Felton. They were kind of looking more at the performance side of sport. So if you want to bowl fast, what do you need to do kind of element of it. And then Pete Allway in more recent years has looked from an injury side of stuff as well. So he's looked at bone health combined with biomechanics, combined with workloads, all of those factors, and how do they combine together to contribute to kind of fast bowling injuries. As I mentioned, injuries are most prevalent in fast bowlers, so that's why it's such an area of interest for us. So my PhD is then taking that a bit further and starting to look at that within the women's game as well. So the women's game is becoming professionalized now, and it's ever growing, particularly with the introduction of the 100 and all of their new franchise tournaments. So actually, can we do a lot of this research that's been done in the men's game? Can we repeat it in the women's game, and even better it as well in some ways, by getting this rich biomechanical data on each of the bowlers as well. So that's kind of my PhD side of it, but this is kind of an ever evolving area within sport as well. So within performance analysis, there's this question of, well, it's great that we can get them in a lab and we can get them all marked up and we can do all this really cool, funky stuff like all of the movies do with their green screen analysis. But is it really what's happening on a pitch out in the middle? And actually, it's quite time consuming as well. So a lot of sports technology is moving towards the use of IMUs and various other bits of technology, video analysis. Like video cameras are such a high quality these days that actually can we use them to analyze biomechanical technique to a high enough degree. So a lot of research is being done across multiple sports at the minute of how can we look at field analysis, really. So field-based analysis, and how does that compare to the lab, and actually can we get rid of lab analysis and use this field-based analysis, which is far more indicative of what's actually happening in the game. So that's a bit of a summary from me on kind of what my role is, and how I use technology in my role as well. Like, it's a really brief overview. We use so much more and we get so much more data. But I also wanted to kind of go across this and kind of my three takings. When I reflected on this, actually, when I was putting this presentation together, kind of what were my reflections for how I've got to where I've got to, and what's helped me advance in my career as well. And for me, it was these kind of three key things. It was seeking out opportunities, as many opportunities as possible, and building those key relationships. So kind of, I guess the easier way to say it would be having your foot in the door and just making sure that you're taking every possible chance possible. I did it as much as I could at university, and it's definitely paid off for me in my kind of later years, and having those relationships established and built. But even as a practitioner day to day, it's so important for me to have those relationships built with other practitioners and other coaches. I can do all the machine learning I want. I can do all of the biomechanical analysis I want, all of the talent ID that I want. But if I don't have those relationships built and established, then all of that analysis will be for nothing. It's just going to fall on deaf ears, in all fairness. So yeah, ensuring that is kind of the solid foundation. My second one that I thought about, and this is something I've thought about a lot in my career, is not being scared to keep a broad outlook. And by what I mean by that is, there's been so many points in my career where I've thought, do I need to specialize a bit more here? Like, am I becoming a bit too broad? Am I trying to be jack of all trades kind of thing? And it has been a real genuine concern for me, but my honest belief is actually that's what's helped me develop my career as far as it's got to this day, by keeping that broad spectrum, by being so adaptable, by having that broader outlook, and by having some knowledge in sports science and knowledge in biomechanics and knowledge in performance analysis and knowledge in data science. It's actually allowed me to really spread my wings and kind of develop that role to what I want it to be, which I don't believe I would have done had I have stayed in my really niche kind of biomechanics route that I was originally set upon going on, to be perfectly honest, even though I have kind of steered my way back there with my PhD as well. And thirdly, and I think most importantly for me, is backing yourself. And I'm going to really loosely link this to kind of the female working in the male dominated kind of squad and environment here. So I'll openly admit I've fully had imposter syndrome feeling before, where you kind of sat in a meeting and I think, what am I doing here? You know, I'm sat in a room with current or former international cricketers, and I just sit and I question myself. And actually, I've learned along the way that backing myself, not in a not in too confident a manner, so you rile people up the wrong way, but actually just backing myself and trusting that I have seeked out all of the opportunities possible, and trusting that I've built those relationships with those individuals that I'm sat in a room with, and trusting myself that I've kept a broad enough outlook that I've actually got the knowledge to share with that group. And just by backing myself, I think that's helped me massively. And I think that's whatever gender you are, whatever environment you're working in, I think that's the real main key important one for me, is just back yourself, and you will get to where you want to be ultimately. So that's it from me. Thank you for listening, and yeah, if anyone's got any questions.
Thank you, Hannah. Just a reminder, if you guys do have any questions for Hannah, to go ahead and drop them in the Q&A chat box. We will spend the next 15 minutes or so answering some of those. Hannah, thank you so much for your presentation. One question we had was, how do you go about staying positive when you are faced with challenges at work?
Wow, okay. It's something I've struggled with over the years, in all honesty, but I think my experience, and as I've grown in maturity as well, has just massively helped that, and realizing, the challenge is not usually personal against yourself, and actually you've just got to try and find a way through it. I've got a really strong team around me, whether it's the coaches that I work with within my squads, or whether it's my performance analysis team that I work with, and they are a massive sounding board for you. So to be honest, I know it sounds really cheesy and easy, but I've never been on my own. Whenever I've had those problems that I faced, I've naturally had those down periods of, but then you pick yourself up, and I've always had someone to go to, whether it's a colleague in performance analysis, whether it's another coach to go to, whoever it's been, there's always someone to act as that sounding board and kind of help you through that kind of problematic challenge that you're facing at that time.
Yeah, I like that advice, that it's not really against you, the challenges you're facing aren't personal necessarily.
Definitely.
Another question we have is, what advice do you have for those aspiring to enter the sports science field?
So I guess it goes back to those three, I'll take it back, those 3 points that I've got there. And I know everyone says it, but honestly, seeking out those opportunities, it's really vital. And it doesn't mean kind of being that person that does something every single day, but really picking out what are the opportunities that are really going to help you as well. You don't have to do absolutely everything, but just seeking stuff where there is. And if you don't see something advertised, be rude, send an email to someone, ask them. The worst they can do is ignore you. What have you lost out, really? Just really do try and seek out. There's some people that I seeked out opportunities back when I was 18, 19, and I'm still in touch with them now, and I've built those relationships, and I know that they're a great connection for me if I need to go back to them now. So it really has paid off for me doing that.
Yeah. And in regards to that, maintaining these relationships, what advice do you have, how to maintain these relationships without bombarding the other person, but being professional, but
I think it's more about just kind of like any relationship, isn't it? Whether a personal or a working relationship, of just ensuring that contact's made at the right time, really. So, there's individuals that I've got those relationships with that I don't speak to for literally months on end. But I know, I'm thinking back to some of my colleagues from my Notts County days now. When you work with someone day in, day out for pretty much every day of the year for a solid year, you build pretty strong relationships. And there's some of those individuals I won't talk to for months on end, but I know if I have a professional query and I think, actually I need to speak to them about that, I can go to them, and I know that they know the same about me. If they need something in return, they'll always come to me and ask the questions as well.
Thank you. Another question we have is, how did you overcome collaboration challenges due to COVID-19? Did you have any trouble creating opportunities due to restrictions, funding, availability, etc.?
Yeah, so you can probably tell from my background, I'm currently sat in my kitchen. So, COVID-19 definitely changed it for everyone, didn't it? So yeah, I've done a lot more research in the last year and a lot less interaction with my squads, which is really unfortunate, but it's the way it has been. So actually, in a way, it's given me greater opportunity to collaborate. It's given me greater opportunity to, everyone's used to Skype calls, everyone's used to Zoom. So whereas previously you had to try and find a space in someone's diary to go and meet them somewhere for a meeting, you can now just pick up the phone or jump on a Skype call or a Zoom call, and you can have that meeting. And so actually it's really helped me with some of my research, and just kind of picking out individuals who I'm like, oh, they'd be able to help me with that research, and then jumping on a Zoom call and just being able to bounce around ideas with them. So personally, for me, actually, it's really helped me with some of that area.
Another question we have is, working in the field of sports is demanding. How do you keep a good work-life balance? And what does your pre-work routine look like?
Honestly, I wasn't very good at it before. I really wasn't. But actually, COVID, again, has really helped me with it. You know, it's really helped me go, no, actually, I need to switch off now. This is Hannah time. Like, this is not work time. The nature of elite sport, you know, I'm contracted to work 9 till 5, but there's weekends that I have to work because it's cricket and it's the summer, and equally, you know, there's other summer holidays that you can't take because you're working, and all of those things. But COVID has definitely kind of helped me reflect upon that and go, actually, if that email doesn't get responded to until tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, it's really not the end of the world. So I'm not really sure that gives you an answer, but it was more just kind of my reflections upon kind of being locked down in my house, and actually realizing, no, working for 12 hours, 15 hours, however many, it's not a competition for how many hours you can work, you know. It's actually about, you know, doing a productive job, and not burning out. And it's taken me a long time to realize that. And yeah, I did finally learn it in this last year, really. So, you know, now in the morning, whether I'm going to work or whether I'm coming down and just sitting at my desk, it's, you know, get up and have that me time before turning on the emails, you know, making sure I'm not switching on the email at 6:30 when the alarm goes off, that I'm actually having a bit of me time before that.
Yeah, that's always important. I feel like a lot of people struggle with that balance, but it seems like COVID has treated you well.
I know.
Another question we have is, being a woman in this field, and like you said, working with like men's teams, what advice do you have for women potentially entering similar fields, like male dominated fields?
Honestly, it's just backing yourself. It really is. Like, and there's genuinely been times that I've sat there and like I said, I've had that imposter syndrome feeling. I think I'd have probably had that feeling even if I was a guy, to be honest. But I think I have it even more because I'm sat there and I'm like, oh, I'm still quite young, and you know, I'm the female in the room, and I definitely feel like I get that feeling a bit more because I am a female. Absolutely nothing that my colleagues have done to kind of make me feel like that at all, just my natural instinct of feeling like that. So it is something that I've struggled with in that way of kind of backing myself. And again, in the more recent years, I've really learned that is the way to do it. Like, my colleagues 100% back me. So I should back myself as well, actually. So yeah, for me, that's it really, kind of working in that male dominated area. And actually a lot of colleagues and a lot of players also really appreciate the added value you can bring as a different perspective as a female. You know, women do see stuff differently to men, you know. It is a fact, you know, not everything, but there are times when it might be a player kind of might open up to me a little bit more just because I'm a female, and they find it a bit easier, and you know, it'd be a really informal chat and suddenly they'll have opened up to me and told me stuff that they wouldn't necessarily have told a male colleague. Or it might just be me kind of seeing the team dynamic slightly differently from a different point of view. And I just think it adds a different dynamic to the dressing room, that and to the team as a whole. And I know that my colleagues actually really do appreciate that different dynamic. And so I've learned that I really do just have to back myself, and yeah, not to have that imposter syndrome feeling, really.
Yeah. Another question I have for you is, where do you see sports tech and sport technology and sport going in the future? Like where do you see it?
I think it's such an exciting, evolving area. As you can see, as a performance analyst, I love data. And I think there's so much potential out there with all of this technology. Like, we're probably going to have too much data. But I think that's a great position to be in. Like, my job is to filter the data and give the right stuff to the coaches. So the more and more, the harder my job is to filter that data, like that's even more exciting for me. I think there's some really exciting stuff coming through with the use of accelerometers and the biomechanical analysis stuff. So I've obviously tried to skirt upon that with like the fast bowling algorithm that we set up and organised. But yeah, I think there's massive potential in that area with some really exciting potential.
Yeah, it's exciting to see where it'll go.
Yeah.
As new things keep coming out and you're just
so quickly, it changes so quickly. Like in the 6 years I've been in this job, I couldn't have imagined 6 years ago we'd be where we are with technology.
Yeah.
Which probably makes me sound really old, but
you're right though. It changes like year to year, month to month. New things are always coming out. So those are actually all the questions we have today. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your experience and your perspective and your advice to everyone. Thank you all also for attending. We will be sending out a recording to everybody, and tomorrow please feel free to join us as we will have Helene Gillamai who joining us, who is the founder of Wild.ai, where she will speak about her mission to challenge the current fitness market by creating technology that serves women. Thank you so much, Hannah, for joining us, and thank you for your time again.
Thank you.